everyone, I'm TFC328 here, and it's not about what you do differently, it's about what you do well. In 2003, I remember celebrating my birthday away from my usual house. Forgive me, my memory isn't the best. What I do remember was that I got, among other things, a PlayStation 2 system and 2 games for it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels to the Roses, which I didn't play very often for whatever reason, and the original Kingdom Hearts, the subject of today's video.
The game that literally came as a result of a Disney and Square executive walking into an elevator together is currently known as one of the greatest franchises of the gaming industry, being Square's best-known series outside of Final Fantasy, and selling very well with each successive entry, with there being over 10 entries at this point. Today we're looking back at the game that started it all, Kingdom Hearts, specifically the revamped Final Mix version found in Kingdom Hearts 1.5 HD Remix.
Let's revisit my childhood, but updated, but not because I ended up downloading a lot of PlayStation 2 footage, with the original Kingdom Hearts.
But first, a quick plot summary. If I were to detail this game plot point by plot point, we'd be here for the next year, so let's keep it brief. You control a boy named Sora. He and his friends, Kairi and Riku, plan on traveling to other worlds on a raft. Yeah, you figure that one out. However, on one night, these dark ants start invading the islands, and as a result, they're destroyed. Sora finds himself in Traverse Town, a sanctuary for those who survived their world's apocalypse.
Several people lost literally everything they knew and loved. You know, for kids!
Sora also discovers that he's the chosen wielder of the Keyblade. Yeah, the Keyblade. Hindsight's a bitch, ain't it? Meanwhile, Donald and Goofy are tasked by their king, Mickey, to find the key, which turns out to be Sora's Keyblade. Subtle. The three eventually meet up and begin traveling to various Disney movies as they defeat heartless and bad guys, meet several iconic characters, and steal the world's keyholes, the gateways to the heart of a world.
You know, for a franchise that is infamous for its convoluted story, this one was actually surprisingly simple and clean.
Though the plot itself may be ultimately basic, it's actually very effective. Right from the tutorial, there's this eerie sense of mystery surrounding this universe and the enemies you fight known as the Heartless. While the shadows pose little threat, the scenario in question seems to present them as otherworldly, unsettling creatures that I certainly felt uncomfortable witnessing when I first played it. Yeah, this game made its equivalent to the Goomba intimidating. Well, to me at least. The foreboding nature of the entire Dive to the Heart segment is especially present in the boss fight that follows, the Dark Side. It's set up as Sora's shadow, or a representation of his inner darkness, if you will, perhaps even subtly foreshadowing a significant event later on. With the environment and music, this fight felt intense, especially since this is the first major battle in the game, and for someone who was still somewhat new to video games like I was at the time, it certainly left an impression on me. Hell, it even has a variation in how you can fight it, by climbing up its arm and attacking its head instead of aiming for its arms exclusively. Just like another great first boss in another awesome game. An excellent tutorial segment that sucked you in with a unique atmosphere while teaching you the basic mechanics of the game, even if it was apparently important to learn how to open chests in order to defeat the forces of darkness.
Beware my incredible chest-tapping skills!
Another element of why this narrative is extremely effective is in the first hour or so of gameplay. Destiny Islands' unique opening level where you explore an island paradise, gather materials for the raft trip, and even have the option to fight against younger versions of Final Fantasy characters Wakka, Selphie, and Tidus, as well as against Riku. It helps establish a sense of kinship between our heroes as close friends, as we see how their normal life is like, to an extent. Well, to the extent where we hear that Sora has a mother. A mother that we never hear about ever again.
In fact, Sora never mentions having a family at all. Asshole.
I especially love how Sora keeps note of the score between him and Riku during their competitions, and the face he makes when Riku tells him to calm down is priceless. This makes it all the more important, once the islands are destroyed and Sora is separated from Riku and Kairi, to go out and find them. The interactions we get to see later also further cement these guys as being real friends. Kairi less so, since she spends most of the game doing her best Princess Aurora impression, but I still get the sense of camaraderie between the three, and it feels believable. Speaking of the islands, their destruction is another well-done aspect. In one simple narrative choice, having our main character's homeworld destroyed by the Heartless, it perfectly shows how dangerous our enemies are if left unchecked, and it equally illustrates the importance of traveling to other worlds and sealing their keyholes, so we can prevent what happened to the islands from happening again somewhere else. Heck, unlike the other major games where the worlds just felt like lamer recaps of the movies they were based on, Kingdom Hearts 1's worlds felt important by having the main antagonistic group be comprised of the Disney villains from those worlds, and on top of that, having the world's narratives be driven by the presence of the Heartless if the world doesn't have a villain associated with them. The Queen of Hearts is putting Alice on trial for something the Heartless tried to do. Clayton loses his heart to the Heartless, which is also the first time you fight Heartless in Deep Jungle. My favorite has to be Halloween Town's reaction to the whole thing, where Jack is actually able to make them work with him for his Halloween routine. They aren't even hostile upon the initial visit! By having the world's stories related to either the Heartless or our villain group, every major encounter feels meaningful, like you're actually making some progress towards the endgame with each successive fight. Even if not every villain you fight is with Maleficent, which makes sense since what would a hunter like Clayton gain from their schemes, it still leaves you with a sense of figuring out a mystery to how the Heartless operate, thus still making progress. I don't get that with the later games. Granted, those games had great worlds and great bosses, but about half of them felt worthless to the overall story. I mean, Shan Yu was a decent fight, but what did it really accomplish as far as main plot progression goes? He has Heartless, and he was a threat to China, sure, but China isn't the main portion of the game, nor is Shan Yu allied with anyone other than himself. Not to mention the Heartless aren't as big a threat in Kingdom Hearts 2, thanks to what happened in KH1, and the greater focus on Organization 13. Let's face it, you could cut out Land of Dragons, and most of the Disney worlds in the later games for that matter, and you wouldn't miss a thing story-wise. And while yes, you could theoretically remove the Disney worlds from a summary of this game as well, it doesn't feel that way when you're playing them. The worlds aren't just condensed rehashes of the movies they're based on. They're tales related to the aspects of the Kingdom Hearts universe, and the writing even manages to show the likability of some of their individual heroes, like showing Aladdin wishing for Genie's freedom, and just the general enthusiasm of Jack Skellington. Never thought I'd be so happy to hang out with a skeleton. Back to the point about the Disney villains, yeah, this was the only game in the series where the Disney villains were the big threat of the game. Sure, Maleficent and Pete antagonized Recoded,
But we don't talk about Recoded in these parts. Well, story-wise at least.
I mean, it is a Disney game, right? Wouldn't it make sense for the main villains to be Disney villains? Not to say that antagonists like Ansem, Xemnas, and Xehanort are bad villains. After all, if Kingdom Hearts has its own heroes and supporting cast, I say it's allowed to have its own villains. But it's strange how only the first game has the major villains be from Disney, and then they simply serve as end-stage bosses from Chain of Memories onwards. But yeah, the Disney villains being a part of a singular group made each encounter with them feel epic and relevant to the plot at hand, while simultaneously building up the final confrontation with Maleficent, which, thanks to an excellent combination of intense music, dark scenery, perfect voice acting, and epic-looking attacks, spectacularly paid off in my opinion. I also found the level design to be quite fascinating. In most of the later games, the levels ultimately felt like hallways with maybe one or two branching paths. Straightforward, but not special. KH1 went and made many of the worlds feel diversely crafted, as if these were the real layouts of each world. While people decry Deep Jungle, the Tarzan world, for its constant backtracking, it's a perfect example of what I mean. Every location is interconnected and there's tons to explore in each area. Instead of feeling like a straight path, it felt like, well, a world. Though there is that aversion to NPCs thing that Kingdom Hearts has in every game. I like to call it Ghost Town Syndrome, but I suppose it's a necessary evil so you can grind in a somewhat realistic fashion. I also find it fascinating how the game handles the trope heads I win, tails you lose, where it's essentially a mandatory boss fight where, even though you technically had to beat it, you lose narratively anyway. It's not just a simple, yeah, wow, fuck you! I'm taking your shit anyway. It's just not mandatory to win certain boss fights, like with Leon, Cloud, or the first fight with Sabor, even though you can. There are even alternate scenes depending on your outcome, something the game does in other areas as well, such as beating Deep Jungle before Wonderland, or playing through Monstro post Hollow Bastion. It rewards multiple varied playthroughs, which is also evidenced by being able to choose certain worlds to play at all, since you can skip Atlantica and play Halloween Town, or vice versa if you wish to simply beat the game. As for stuff that isn't required, this game started my fascination with optional bosses, and the selection here was great, except for Phantom. He's just tedious, though the concept is good. Kurt Zisa, named so after a contest winner from New York,
I wonder what became of that kid.
was an awesome visual design that had cool attacks, a nice shake-up on the gameplay. It was just a joy to defeat. Ice Titan was pretty much guard spam, but his damage output made him tough at lower levels, and something of this scale is just great to witness firsthand anyway. Sephiroth was the ultimate test of skill in this game, demanding you be on your A-game all throughout the fight or else he'll hand your ass on a silver platter. That reminds me, why is this fight only worth a bronze trophy? Xemnas in Final Mix was interesting, but I admit that I was able to beat him very easily by mashing attack and healing occasionally. Then again, I was level 82 after trying to grind synth items for the ultimate weapon, so that may have helped. Granted, I had Divine Rose since I didn't get enough to synth ultimate weapon, not helped by me picking the sword so I didn't get Lucky Strike until level 90, but still. Speaking of which, the ultimate weapon is a great reward for all the work you put into trying to get it, gathering every single material you can to create all the synth items, including the best weapon in the game bar none. This feeling is further amplified by the extra materials you need in the final mix version. Kingdom Hearts 2 did this as well, requiring at least one of every material and completion of the optional worlds to obtain all the Orichalcum Pluses needed to make the ultimate weapon. Unlike in Birth by Sleep or 3D, where you just had to beat one of the optional challenges. BBS less so, since you needed to reach maximum arena level or near it in order to unlock the challenge in question, so you're still working your ass off. But 3D especially, since not only is that challenge the one optional boss the game has, but it also becomes a bragging rights reward since you have nothing to try it out on that you haven't beaten before. Besides, I just think the ultimate weapon looks awesome. I do have one thing to add to the optional bosses. The fascinating pattern they had. You add a Disney boss, a Final Fantasy boss, a Heartless boss or two, and a non-Heartless Kingdom Hearts boss should you count Zenith in Final Mix /1.5, which at this point you may as well. The other games just had Heartless or Kingdom Hearts characters, save Sephiroth in 2, Monstro in BBS Final Mix, and Julius in 3D. It's a strange, likely unintentional balance in KH1, and that intrigues me. All this goes to show how much effort there was into making this game as excellent as possible, which, given this is a relatively serious story where you fight alongside Donald, Duck, and Goofy on a regular basis, you need to have some of the strongest execution possible to make it work at all. Then again, this is the same company that about a decade later would make an MMO so bad they had to literally nuke it in order to make it playable. Square is known for being able to get out of ditches like this.
Now, as much as I love this game, I'll be the first to admit it ain't perfect. After all, it is the first game in the series, and given how many follow-ups there are, how could you make something better than perfection if you ended up doing it the first time around?
Even though I personally think this game holds up today, it does show its age in certain areas, which can be a major turn-off for newcomers. For one, the sound editing seems to be off. Granted, this could just be an issue with the 1.5 version, but I noticed some near Sonic Adventure 2 levels of bad audio editing, like here.
We had a deal, yes? You help us, and we grant you your wish.
Kyrie!
Wow, I don't think a Slowpoke would have that delayed a reaction.
It's not too common, but it's there. And again, may just be a 1.5 thing. As far as the narrative was concerned, I was never a fan of the whole don't meddle in the affairs of other worlds rule they established early on and try to enforce throughout the series. I mean, the Heartless themselves are meddling in these affairs, given they run only on instinct, so Sora and Co. would have to meddle in order to take care of the problem. In other words, for the entire series to work, it can't even follow its own rules. Now, you could argue that since the Heartless are an outside threat, that's when they can come in and they won't interfere with the problems only relevant between the peoples of the world. In that sense, I can understand. And I also appreciate how they don't spoon-feed that information to us like we can't put the pieces together. Kids are smarter than they look, after all. However, the series still screws those rules over with Atlantica and KH2. There are no Heartless in that world, no organization members or nobodies, and Ursula isn't associated with anybody else like she was with Maleficent in KH1. The remaining narrative is a condensed retelling of The Little Mermaid. In other words, a scenario that is nothing but a problem exclusive to the people of that world.
The most disliked world in Kingdom Hearts is also a living plot hole. Lovely.
Sure, Atlantica in Kingdom Hearts 2 is optional, but Kingdom Hearts has a tendency to make optional segments part of the canon, like not needing to restore Mushu from the summon gem you get for defeating the Maleficent Dragon, but he'll still recognize Sora and Co. in KH2. For that matter, Olympus Coliseum, Halloween Town, and Atlantica are optional worlds in KH1. You never needed to go to the Hercules world in order to reach the final fight with Ansem, and you only need to tackle either Halloween Town or Atlantica in order to beat the game, like I said before. And yet all the characters from those worlds will still recognize Sora and vice versa in other future appearances. And need I mention KH1FM's secret boss?
I've been to see him. He looks a lot like you.
Americans wouldn't understand the context of that line until 1.5 without the internet. Granted, Atlantica may not be returning for Kingdom Hearts 3, so...
Be right back, gonna go fix myself. Just shot myself in the foot. Ow! Ow!
Also, why couldn't Riku come with you guys again? There's literally no reason given. Another thing I hated was the AI for Donald and Goofy. While they would heal me when I just cast Cure and were just plain useless otherwise, it was with the white mushrooms that I lost my shit with them. You see, whenever I needed to go and cast a spell on them to get the arts or the mystery goo for synthesis, 9 times out of 10, either Dolan or Goomy would insist on standing in front of the white mushroom, preventing me from seeing what they wanted me to cast. It annoyed the fuck out of me every time it happened. On the topic of the camera, it's certainly unrefined. In the original game, it was controlled using the L2 and R2 buttons, but 1.5 actually let you use the right analog stick like in any good 3D PlayStation game that has analog control. But for the love of all the DDs I can name for the sake of merely referencing them, please play on the manual setting. The auto camera is not very good at keeping the platforming focused. Given the way the levels are structured in this game, platforming is a major part of the game. The manual camera can be a bit screwy, but the auto camera is even worse. Platforming can be awkward too, regardless of camera. It can be argued as something you just get used to, especially once you get high jump, but it's just not that good. Probably could have used a stronger drop shadow. I've never been able to beat Riku in that opening foot race no matter how hard I tried, and one look at Trickmaster on the internet will tell you no one enjoyed having to climb up the chair in order to do some friggin' damage on the thing. While I appreciate the more open-ended level design, it's no surprise that they kinda dropped those elements from later games.
But no matter how flawed it may be, the original Kingdom Hearts, or this 1.5 HD version specifically, will always hold a special place in my heart for all the good it did.
The game still looks great to this day, even without the HD remix. The music is absolutely spectacular and certainly memorable. The story was simple to grasp and knew how to suck you in. The gameplay was tons of fun, even on just a simple grind. The controls, while awkward for platforming, were still good enough for the action, and the bosses were certainly stellar. It's got its issues, but it's the first game in the series, and its follow-ups would in many ways rectify them. Even so, the great parts of this game more than outweighed shortcomings, and I would certainly recommend it, especially for people interested in the series but don't know where to start. You can either get the original on PS2, the 1.5 HD remix version on PS3 which has Rechain Memories as well, and very soon there's going to be a 1.5 plus 2.5 for PS4 which not only has this game, but Rechain of Memories, 2, and Birth by Sleep, all with their final mix content in 60 frames per second HD glory. If you haven't played this series before, I'd say it's at least worth a try. Like Bionicle Mask of Light, it's a staple of my childhood, and for good reason.
I'm Transformers Fanco328, and it's awesome that now you'll be able to play the entire series on the PlayStation 4. Well, unless you want to actually play 358 and recode it. What a silly thought.
Yes! Got an S rank!
Oh, hey everyone, I'm Transformers Fanco328 here, and it's not about what you do differently, it's about what you do well. You know, I'm really sorry for how long it took for me to make this video, but I explained the reasoning in the credits. But the reason why we're here is because, as it was taking me so long to make the video, I realized a big problem with it. I never talk about the gameplay!
This is honestly upsetting since that's been my favorite part of all the Kingdom Hearts games. Really, I meant the review to be more of why KH1 of all games was my favorite compared to the rest, you know, the little details, and I'll admit the gameplay was stronger and better refined in later games. But that doesn't mean I hate it here. In fact, if I didn't like it in the first game, why would I keep up with the series since? Given how early in my life I got this game, this was pretty much the reason I prefer games with more direct control of the action. The Keyblade feels satisfying to land hits with. The magic's rudimentary but helpful. The summons are cool, but not the most useful unless you're speedrunning or Tinkerbell. The abilities are a great way to expand the gameplay as you get progressively stronger, and the enemy variety is surprisingly decent. Every world has a few universal Heartless like the Shadows or Dark Balls once the Riku Anthem's defeated, but almost every world has its own unique Heartless enemies that you won't see anywhere else, such as the Deep Jungle's Power Wilds, Agrabah's Bandits, and Atlantica's, well, all of them. Like I say in the wrap-up, I had fun mowing through these enemies even on a simple grinding session. That's how good the combat is. It's just very fundamental compared to, say, the flashiness of 2 or 3D.
I know it's dumb for me to put this part of the review at the end here, but I'd probably feel dumber trying to wedge it into the flow of the actual review.
Make the evil living Bill!